and also, coming through and giving me a little more soul.
Nibble it, just see what you're missing.
Yeah. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Have you seen that episode of 30 Rock where Jack Donaghy is talking to himself in the bathroom mirror and his speaker is on into the room?
Yeah, and then Liz tries to pretend that it was her doing the impression of him.
Yeah, I'm watching 30 Rock right now on Netflix. Super funny. All right, should we get going? All right, round 2. How's the lighting for everybody? Do you like it? Is it too light, too dark?
I like lighter for me, otherwise I'll go to sleep.
Yeah, when it's that dark, I just want to lay down.
Yeah.
Do have somebody lead us in a mindfulness exercise. But all right, so we have just a wee bit more on moderation. Then we're going to go into mediation and how to test mediation. All right, so everyone have the gist. We can do this by testing moderation in AMOS, M+, HLM, SPSS. Real similar process. Huh. Why?
It looks like you have the little task bar. Is it maximized?
Oh, wow. Oh, it looks weird. Huh. No, it's not. It was right there. Oh, it's all right. I got it. Okay, so we were testing it. These would be ways we could test it in AMOS, drawing a pretty picture. In M+, you could draw a similar pretty picture or write out the syntax and our output. All right, McNulty. I heard him give a presentation once, and I just remember being struck by, I like you. You are smart, you are wise, and I could listen to you talk for a long time. But he was doing some interesting work. He was presenting on this general topic of when positive processes hurt. I think it's really interesting. So we all assume do good things happen in your relationships, right? But he's looking at when do positive processes not help? What does that sound like to you? Yeah, this is a moderation thing. Super interesting stuff. When is it that positive processes might actually hurt? So this is as abstract. I'm just going to read through these 2 sentences here. There's about 4 predictors he has, and then 2 moderators. If you can listen for him here. Says generally, it's like we're having a hard time with couples. We try to help them do good things and stop doing bad things, but they don't all get better. Why is that? Why might that be? So what's the moderator here, right? In general, when you're doing research and you're doing a lit review that sounds like this person found it was a positive effect, this person found a negative effect, this person found no effect, I hope your mediation moderation ears perk up, and that's a moderator, right? We can keep doing those studies over and over again. Well, I found it was positive, like the other 20 people. But 20 other people found it was negative, and 20 other people found no effect. What would be more useful for that area of research is not to do that same study again, but we need to find out what's the moderator. Is the moderator that in this sample they were younger? Is the moderator that in this sample they had more money? Is the moderator... But we need to figure out why is it that way? So what he was looking at here said specifically, although more positive expectations, so expectations, thinking that things are going to be good in your relationship, right? Generally, I would say that's a good thing. Some people have pretty low expectations, and maybe that's better for them. But anyway, also positive attributions, so explaining our partner's behavior in a way that's kind and warm, as opposed to they did it because they're a selfish jerk that hates me. Less negative behavior, being kind and nice. I think all of us would think that's a good thing. And more forgiveness. Forgiveness makes sense as well, right? The more forgiving we are, that maybe we should have better relationships. However, they found that when we were doing it in these directions of more positive expectations, more positive attributions, less negative behavior, and more forgiveness, most effectively maintained satisfaction among spouses facing infrequent and minor problems. So our moderator here is infrequent problems and minor problems. If you have infrequent and minor problems, doing all those obvious things, that's a good thing for you to be doing. However, if you're in the context of you're facing frequent problems and serious problems that aren't so minor, doing the opposite, actually, they found to be helpful. So in those cases, where does the next line start? However, less positive expectations, less positive attributions, more negative behavior, and less forgiveness most effectively maintain satisfaction among spouses facing more frequent and more severe problems. And they theoretically said that's probably because it's forcing them to, let's say this was done with newlyweds over the first 4 years into their marriage. If I forgive my spouse of every bad thing they do right away, that doesn't really encourage them to change anything, does it? If no matter what they do, my attributions for her is, oh, she's so wonderful though. It's just like the best thing that's ever happened to me. Nothing about my wife is imperfect. That's nice. That sounds kind, doesn't it? But it also doesn't help us change anything. That sometimes having really awkward, uncomfortable moments as a couple might actually help us out long term. Isn't that interesting? Most of the couples that we work with face severe and frequent problems, right? So in that context of frequent and severe problems, us saying, why don't you do more nice behaviors? Let's be more forgiving. Let's think nicer things about your spouse. Expectations. You should expect the world from her. I mean, you deserve to have it all. When we do that, you see how, until we have research like this, doesn't that make logical sense that we would tell people to do those things that seem obvious? Until we test it and test moderation, like in what context should we not do that, it really changes things quite a bit, doesn't it? So if you're working, at least with this sample, younger newlywed couples, that it could generalize better to them, but younger newlywed couples facing frequent and severe problems, you probably don't want to tell them to just do all those nice, obvious things, that maybe they need to work some of it out to have some changes come about. All right, this is also by McNulty. He does all the best moderation work in marital research, in my very biased opinion. And unfortunately, he's a systems guy, but he's a clinical he's in a psychology program. I guess I don't know what his degree was in, but he's a psych guy. But he does really good research in our area. So neuroticism is that general tendency to experience negative affect. I'll give you one suggestion when you're seeking out partners if you're not already hooked up. I would generally say let's lean towards lower neuroticism and your relationship is a little bit easier to handle. But that general of like, you did what? Sick of that! Like just any little thing can push them to an extreme response. So generally, what do you think? This is the most robust finding in all of marriage research, because psychologists have done so much with it. But neuroticism, the more neurotic we are, the less happy we are in our relationships, right? So a lot of times people get upset if we don't control for it, if we have it. But neuroticism, the more of that, we're not quite as happy if our partner is like always on the verge of flipping out on us, which makes sense. So when you're dating and they're flipping out at the server, I would take that as a mental note. Then they're flipping out at people while they're driving home, like, Generally, people are going to be really unhappy partnered to you. I don't know if I'll be the one that can make it all better. And if that's us, then we need to do our own self-work, maybe, on that too. So this is an association that's really, really strong, right? Really strong, super robust. It's replicated lots of times. What might be something that could balance out neuroticism in a marriage? It's obviously kind of a big thing, right? Comes up a lot. It's probably pretty painful each time it does. But what might be something that's good enough that it could buffer out the effects of neuroticism?
Alcohol use.
I'm so drunk I don't even know she's mad. That's true. You know what? In certain contexts of total drunken stupor, like, oh, I don't care what she's talking about. I don't know where I am. Is that even my wife? Good. So alcohol could maybe wipe it clean. That's kind of funny. Yeah. I didn't think about it that way, but alcohol could do it. Good. So there's one. We could test that out. It'd have to be really high levels of alcohol, right? Not just a little buzz. It'd have to be a lot. Yeah. What else might be able to buffer out some of the effects of neuroticism? Great sex. What about great sex might help somebody do a better job living with a partner that's always on the verge of flipping out at them? What do you think? Less stress. They've got passion and that intimacy from sex, that they're breaking the shower door and they're okay, even though she flips out or he flips out. He was looking at it with both partners, but I'm just saying as I'm a guy. But the partner's flipping out a lot. Great sex maybe could balance that out. I think maybe oodles of money for some people, potentially, if you're swung by that. Maybe, like, we have a yacht, I don't care that they... It wouldn't for me, but maybe for somebody. But yeah, he tested sexual frequency. He wanted to know, I mean, these are realistic questions, right? Sometimes we are working with a couple and one partner is really high in neuroticism, or maybe both. So what do we do? This is also, sex is kind of a weird moderator variable. One of my master's students just tested this with depression, and essentially his implications were if couples will have a lot more sex, they won't be as depressed. But clinically, that is harder to apply of, well, maybe they don't want to right now. But anyway, but sexual frequency was tested out. This interaction between sexual frequency and neuroticism was significant. And our main effects here that were significant was he controlled for initial levels of marital satisfaction. The direct effect of neuroticism, this main effect was significant. Sexual frequency, the direct effect was not significant, right? But the interaction was. And just put in part of the paragraph from the article so you could see an example of how it can be phrased. But nevertheless, so start at the top. Not surprisingly, neuroticism was negatively associated with reports of satisfaction on average for this whole sample. Nevertheless, as predicted, the main effect was qualified by a significant positive interaction of these two, neuroticism and sexual frequency. So this main effect was qualified, was changed by the level of sexual frequency. Look at these nice little bar graphs. You can make this as two lines or as bar graphs. On our outcome, our y-axis here is marital satisfaction, the condition of low sexual frequency, and low means 1 standard deviation low. High means 1 standard deviation high. And same here with low and high neuroticism. We're actually, in this chart right here, average level people are not even included at all. We're just looking at high and low for neuroticism and sex. So in this figure, I want you to look at this for a couple of minutes and try to figure out what this means. So the y-axis, higher, is more marital satisfaction. So what condition is the happiest person in this little data set? Say it louder.
I said low neuroticism.
Yeah, low neuroticism and low sex. Interestingly enough. If your partner's real stable, like it's not a little stable, but exceptionally stable, it takes like nothing really pushes them over the edge, and you're having very little sex, actually in this data set, that was the condition where people were the happiest. Interesting, huh? What's our condition where they're the least happy? High neuroticism, low sex. Those couples are having a little more of a challenge. There's a lot of somebody's mad and flipping out a lot. There's no sexual intimacy either. But what's interesting here, at the high sex, so in this condition where there's a lot of sex, there's very little difference here, isn't there, in marital satisfaction based on low or high neuroticism. So we could say that sexual frequency really is a protective, buffering kind of variable for this because of this interaction. We can't, from this, I gather almost nothing. We don't get the and the intercept here, the main effect here, and the interaction effect. So we could plot this interaction ourselves too, just by putting in those 4 values. But when we make our figure, that's where we get to actually make sense of, so what's going on here? So some ways we can do it is interpret this as just by looking at different points. Where are people high and low? Another way we talk about it is as we're increasing on our x-axis, so as we're increasing in sexual frequency, this condition of low neuroticism, as we increase in sexual frequency in the low neuroticism group, it's kind of stable. This isn't a big drop from 40 to 39 point something, but fairly stable. It drops down a tiny bit. But in the condition of high neuroticism, as we increase in sexual frequency, we're increasing in marital satisfaction. And that increasing and staying stable, we would want to look at the simple slopes for that. He didn't in this paper, which was the paper I used when I modeled after when I was doing my first one. Did it like his, and then I got him reamed, and rightfully so. But so as we're looking at these sort of figures, there's a lot that can be said about this, and this kind of depends on what your research question was. If my research question was, in the condition of high neuroticism, are folks that are having more sex buffered in their marital satisfaction, we would largely then just be talking about these 2 bar graphs. If our research question was a little bit different about trends, about as we're increasing in this, in these different conditions, how does that affect our outcome variable? Very interesting, huh? I want you to think about the couples that you're facing, the challenges they have, because they're all in, and we all have them. But the challenges that we face, what can moderate that to, yes, this is tough, we're in this really tough situation. So often when our clients talk about their situations, like, wow, that's really... Anyway, I feel like some of the worst stories I've ever heard have been in my own clients or in supervision talking about clients. But in this awful, really sad, tough situation that you're in, experiencing trauma or this rough life, what moderates what would normally be expected to happen in that kind of situation to be helpful for people? What I love about moderation studies, which is my bias of the 2, I just think that I want to be a moderator in my own life. I want to help people, whatever we think is normal and expected for their situation, I want to moderate that to somehow make it better than how it is right now. If it's expected that you're going to have substance abuse, or if it's expected that you're going to be discriminated against, what can moderate that to change it so it doesn't have to be that way? And the nice thing about moderation results is we're looking at what conditions is it better like that, and what conditions are those people that have experienced trauma doing a lot better. And what conditions are people that have all these risk factors for alcohol abuse not drinking at all and have great relationships? What's going on that moderates what we think is going to happen? Those clinical implication sections almost write themselves of, well, in this condition, so maybe based off of this, be linked with therapists that do this. It might be helpful to try more of this or that. This language here only applies if you have a significant interaction effect. If you do not have a significant interaction effect, do not use any of these words. If you're a reviewer and somebody is using this language but they do not have a significant interaction effect, they are talking about it incorrectly. We're overstating our data with a main effect to use this language unless we have a significant interaction term. This interaction term right here is the only way we use that language. This significant main effects here doesn't allow us to use this kind of language. A moderator buffers the effect. A main effect does not. An interaction term is a protective factor or exacerbates the effect or depends on levels of the moderator, is qualified by, or it's stronger for this group than for that group. We only use this language if we've tested it. And if you do that, you will be far ahead of a lot of people that are out there right now. It happens all the time. We will things mentally that we want to say that we can't say from our results. We do it all the time. We overstate our data way too much. If we tested an association between two things, we can only talk about it as an association, as a link, not this influences, this impacts, this leads to. We don't know that. We just know they're associated, that they link. If we have a significant interaction effect, we can talk about in these conditions it's associated with these scores there, but not that it. But the main effects, we don't say that. Everybody got that? Please help your friends. When you're co-authoring a paper with somebody, faculty or students, and they do this, say, can you remind me, did we test an interaction effect? Because if we didn't, we can't say it that way unless we tested an interaction effect. But I like how it sounds worded that way. So maybe we should test the interaction effect and put it in. But if we don't find the interaction effect to be significant, we have to take it out. All right, mediation. We ready for round 2? Dun-dun-dun-dun. I don't know if we're going to finish or not, but we might stay till midnight just for fun. If we don't finish, it's all right. You had the slides. It'll be helpful. We'll get as far as we can get. So mediators are the stepping stones, the indirect effects. We're switching gears from the moderator that's changing in effect now. So this figure is kind of what we show for an indirect effect. This figure is what we show for this would be the conceptual model for an interaction effect. The statistical model is the predictor, moderator, and interaction term, but this is what we show as the conceptual. I was just telling somebody this on the phone in a conversation. We were just talking about this, but for all of us, this B variable is the mediator. This A to B to C is a mediated pathway. But if some people are real sticklers, we don't have hardly any in MFT. But in family studies and in psychology, there are quite a few sticklers that if we have A significantly predicts B, B significantly predicts C, and we test it with bootstrapping or Sobel or something else to find this is significant, most of us could call that an significant indirect effect or a significant mediating effect. But the sticklers are only going to call it a significant mediating effect or a significant mediator if this relationship between A and C was lessened after we added in our mediator variable. Or if this is no longer significant for some of the sticklers. Does that make sense? If you call it an indirect effect, you're always safe and you'll never offend anyone. If you call it a mediator and this is still significant, some people might raise an eyebrow of, well, I don't know, maybe. But we liked the original definition that Barron and Kenny put forth for mediation was that this association between predictor and outcome was lessened when we included the mediator. Barron and Kenny had their 4 steps, and one of the steps was that this got smaller. And so that's sort of tradition for a lot of us. But I personally really don't care. But but just so you know, I don't want anyone to, that's not mediation, that's indirect, that you can smile and nod. Exactly. You're one of those. Yes, it is an indirect effect. Thank you for pointing that out. I'll just call it an indirect effect.
I guess I was wondering how when individuals discuss partial mediation, is that part of that conversation?
Is that right here? There it is.
Jumping ahead.
Yeah. So full mediation and partial mediation. So yeah, a full mediation is when that path from predictor to the outcome is no longer significant. Partial mediation is when they're all 3 still significant. But if the path, where is it? If this path, for mediation, these always have to be significant, A to B and B to C. Sometimes, in a couple fluky situations I've seen, they're like right on the line of significance and not quite, and the other one is also right on the line. Sometimes those do show up as significant indirect effects. Most of the time they don't, but sometimes it'll work out that way. But yeah, so if this A to C is still significant, it means that's a partial mediation. If A to C is not significant, it means it's fully mediated. This association between A and C fully goes through that mediator. And theoretically, it means that once we know this mediator is there, I don't remember very well, age to length of time together to Sexual satisfaction was one of our indirect effects. It might be that age is no longer significantly associated with sexual satisfaction once we account for length of time together as the mediator. So then we would say it's fully mediated. This effect goes fully through our mediator variable. You can put it in your paper and label it full mediation or partial mediation if you want, based on how that works out. All right. Questions so far where we're at? Mediation starting off? Okay. Lots of times we use the word mechanism to talk about mediation and indirect effects. It's the mechanism through which this is linked with that is through these stepping stones. Right. Theoretically, we believe that this independent variable causes this and that this causes this. We never say cause based off of correlational regressions and SEMs, but theoretically that we think this should cause this and then this should cause this. All right, we mentioned this already, but I'll just quiz you to see if you remember. Wait, did we? No, we didn't. I don't think we did. But we could have. Yes, we did. So if you're reading the slides too already, but let's say that we have a situation where everybody knows this predictor is linked with this outcome. What should we be testing in that situation? When everybody finds the same result, that more of this is always linked with more of that. In that case, it's actually mediation. If we always find it the same direction that this is, maybe we say, well, we'll go back to neuroticism, I guess. Everybody has found the same thing. Neuroticism is associated with lower relationship quality. So we don't necessarily need to keep doing more of those. We could look at what is the process for how neuroticism affects relationship quality. That maybe part of it is I feel worse about myself every time you yell at me. And every time you flip out, I think you're not going to be a good parent to our kids, and it scares me that you seem like you can explode. I wonder if you're ever going to hit me. But we would want to start to identify what is the process, the mechanism for how this predictor affects this outcome. So in general, in your research areas, if there's a super strong association that nobody really doubts anymore, the next steps of research in that area is to look at mediators to find the process of how that unfolds. If your research area, people find stuff all across the board, randomness of, well, sometimes if you do this, it helps, sometimes if you do that, it hurts, then that research area, we really need a moderator to find what flips the switch on the train track for why it helps compared to why it won't help.
And you can have different moderators, depends on the content, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and even some models will have multiple moderators. So Zenova's doing something now with lots of moderators. But if you believe lots of things might change it, then we test it that way, the way we have it in our head of that all these things might be changing this or that. So I hope that your red flags go up when people are saying, well, everybody knows that. You're like, okay, well then I'll test mediation to help us expand how this happens then. And if people are talking about your research area and they say, well, we don't really know exactly, because sometimes mindfulness helps with this, but other times mindfulness just makes you more painfully aware of how horrible your partner is. But there would be a moderator there somewhere, right? And we're like, well, sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't. So what's the moderator for why it does help compared to when it doesn't? All right. This part, we're going to do a smidgen fast because, frankly, I don't want you to do the old school methods anymore. It's more of just a walk through memory lane of what they used to do, of what a lot of folks still do. But to skip right to the chase, we want to test mediation and indirect effects with bootstrapping. But in the past, we've done the 4 steps of 4 different regressions that Barron and Kenny suggest. There's also been steps along the way to do the Sobel test, to do the Prodklin method. There's something else I had up there. Oh, just an SEM. You can just test them all at the same time and see if they're all significant. Some people just see a bunch of significant paths and call that a significant indirect effect. But really, bootstrapping is what we should all be doing because it has quite a few advantages. So the others, if something feels fuzzy on it, that's actually all right. You can let it stay fuzzy because I don't want you to do it. Fair enough. I know for our master's thesis, everyone that did at the time was doing mediation, or everybody was doing the 4 steps, and that seemed normal at the time. But we don't need to do that anymore. So just so you know, when you're reviewing a paper, you could ask them to test it with bootstrapping. And do you know what I do when I'm a reviewer? Might be reviewing for some of you someday. But instead of saying you tested mediation incorrectly, you can use correct grammar when you're a reviewer too. But instead of just saying it really blunt, maybe give them, they did it that way, it's probably because that's the way they know how to do it. So you could suggest Preacher and Hayes in 2008, in this article, they outline how to bootstrap and why bootstrapping is a preferred method over all of the others. If you do it in M+, this is how you can bootstrap, or Andrew Hayes has developed macros and SPSS, so you could do it this way. But try to be helpful and point them in the right direction of, like if it was our field is tiny, we're reviewing for our best friends all the time. And half the time we know exactly who they are. My first year as a faculty, I emailed the editor, I'm like, I don't think I can review for this one. Any East Carolina people in here? Yeah? It was like, oh, I know this is the faculty at East Carolina. I really like them a lot. Angela and Jennifer, I don't know if I should review it because I know it's them. And the editor was like, it doesn't matter. In our field, we're just tiny. Everybody knows everybody. Just like, okay. But we do. I see NCFR and AMFT like, oh, this is my friends from this plow. Look at their. So we're just reviewing for our close buddies in our tiny field all the time. So try to be helpful and kind. If somebody did it an incorrect way they didn't know, be really clear of, you could try it this way. Here's another way we could do that. All right, everybody see it already? Check an association between predictor and mediator, mediator and outcome, predictor and outcome, and then see if we've got that association between the predictor and outcome got smaller. So this is 4 regressions, or you can run it in path analysis or SCM and just run it once, which is better. Just run it once instead of the 4 regressions. We've talked about this. If the path C gets closer to 0 when we add in our mediator, if it's fully at 0, no association at all, we have full mediation. There we have that again. In real life, most of us have lots of mediators. Lots and lots of mediators. It's not just one mediator. It might be a long process of mediators, or if there's one predictor, one outcome, maybe there's just a lot of mediators that are kind of in the middle. Do you work with Angela or Jennifer? They're so wonderful, aren't they? They're good people. I like them a lot. I love them. So we have really, really good people in our field. If you haven't got to meet lots of faculty and other grad students, have you noticed in your programs that people are generally really nice, really kind, and sensitive, and warm, and happy? And when I talk to my brother-in-law, who's an attorney, or my other brother-in-law, who's a doctor, when they talk about their experiences at work, I'm like, whoa, that would never happen. The people I work with, that's really jerky, awful thing to do. But really, our field is just full of super, super nice, good people. And when you're reviewing for them or don't know them and you just see a random person over there, it's probably someone that you would really like if you did know them. So I hope that you get to meet lots of our people in our field. I think it would eat most of us up if we got thrown into law school or... My brother-in-law said that they were ranked from 1 to 150. Every month or so, they would update it for your rankings of who was number 1 and who was number 150 and all the way down. Just awful, awful. And knowing that only the top 10% are going to get good jobs. Everyone else is going to get a stinky job. It's nice for us to like everybody. There's room for everybody. It's a little It's more pleasant. We're lucky in our field. All right, the Sobel test. Has everybody heard of this one or somewhere along the way? This is really easy to do. The quick gist of the Sobel test is it's a way to test mediation, but you can really only do it if you have 500 or more people in your sample. And most of us don't have 500 or more for the things we run, or at least sometimes it gets smaller than that. Full name, product of coefficients approach. Do you know what an indirect effect is? Let's say that this path right here has an unstandardized beta of 0.2, and that this path right here has an unstandardized beta of 0.2. The way we compute an indirect effect is literally by multiplying this path by that path. So if we have a 0.2 times a 0.2, 2 times 2 is 4, so it's the 0.04 is the indirect effect. So we would say a 1 unit increase in this predictor is associated with a 0.04 unit increase in our outcome via its previous effect through this mediator while controlling for whatever controls were in our model. But the important part here is how we compute this indirect effect is really closely linked with what the Sobel test is doing. It's based off the strength of this association by its standard error and the strength of this association by its standard error. Together, combined, does that make a significant indirect effect? Could you, so this is a made-up model, made-up numbers, but I'm a sweater. I wish I wasn't. But let's say we had a data set with some weird variables of anxiety prior to first date. Predicts volume of sweat produced, which might predict perceived odor. So in this sample, in this fake model here, if this unstandardized beta was 0.3 with a standard error of 0.1, and this path coefficient, this was the unstandardized beta was 0.4, and the standard error is 0.12. How many of you have internet working right now? This one, it keeps logging me off. I think every half an hour it turns me off the internet.